Hello, everybody. How are you? This is History Tea Time Chat Live. And today, well, I was away last week, so I'm back and I'm going to tell you all about, I'm going to tell you about my trip last week, which was to Lincoln and York. So I was off doing some research ready for new tour ideas. But anyway, if you are planning a trip up to either Lincoln or York, then I will tell you where I would recommend you go and why. So I hope you're all well. Hope you didn't miss me too much last week. I'm on your screens twice today for now, and also History After Dark later. If you can join me, Catherine Brooks and Katrina Marchant for that. We're on History After Dark. We're talking about Charles Darwin tonight. But let's get into this. So I am streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. So welcome. I hopefully can keep an eye on both things, Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. My lipstick doesn't really go today. I look really whited out. Anyway, never mind. Hello, Linda. Yes, thank you. Well, it's okay. We'll see. I'll see you later. Deborah, Melissa, Amanda. Who else have we got? Welcome. So yeah, sorry I was a bit late. My tea hadn't brewed. So, this is History Tea Time Chat Live. So so it is warm and I will be having a sip of it. So for those of you who don't know, my name's Philippa Lacey-Brawl and I am everything behind the British History Channel and a company called British History Tours. So last week I combined the two things by going for a trip up to, I say up because it's up for me, Lincoln, and to York. Lincoln, Lincolnshire, York, Yorkshire. And they're linked by quite a bit of history, but specifically if you're a Tudor fan and a Gareth Russell fan, they were both places on the 1540 progress which Henry VIII did with Catherine Howard. This was the progress where Catherine Howard and Thomas Culpeper began their liaisons, and where she wrote to him, where she declared her love. So you can literally follow in their footsteps of not just the fact that they were there, but that there was this momentous life-changing events which happened, which led to the downfall of Catherine Howard and her lady-in-waiting Jane Rochford, or Jane Boleyn, if you like. She was married to Anne Boleyn's brother. So it's also, of course, the hotbed of what was known as the Pilgrimage of Grace, which happened in 1536. That was an uprising of sorts, not as violent as it was made out to be by Henry and by his council to justify its put down. But the Pilgrimage of Grace had effectively been a protest movement where they wanted to petition the king to slow down or stop the closing of the monastic houses. And when you go to York, especially, and you realise how many there were, including the largest hospital in the country, as far as I believe, St Leonard's, and you realise these were they were seeing them close down. Everywhere, of course, across the country was seeing monastic houses closed down, but York was one of those cities that had a particular concentration of places, and so that it was being felt very strongly there. It's also the place there then that so this is there were the punishments. A lot of them, the punishments were taken out, including Robert Aske, who was one of the leaders of this movement, who was hung in chains from York Castle. Now, York actually had two castles, and not at the point of the Tudors, but when William the Conqueror conquered and came up to the north, he built two castles, one on either side of the River Ouse, I think it is. Now, the River Ouse was flooding when I was there, and there is a particular car park. I think it was called St George's Car Park now. Might have that wrong, but that was completely underwater. And what's interesting is that is actually specifically the area where one of the kings, I think it was subsequent king, I don't think it was William, ordered for a pond, what they called a pond, to be to be built, to be dug out. And that area is the area that still floods, and it flooded. There was absolutely no way you're going anywhere near this particular area. And the other castle is just a motte now, and I've got some photographs of it to share. And I was wondering where this motte was, and it turned out I was coming out of my hotel and turning left and to go into York. And if I'd have been turning out and going right, I would have come across the motte immediately. But anyway, I did find it. It was also on the edge of the York City walls, which is easy. It's so accessible and it's great to walk around. I wanted to go and find Micklegate. Micklegate is the gate where Richard, Duke of York, so the father of the guy who become Edward IV and Richard III, actually. Richard, Duke of York, was killed at the Battle of Wakefield. He was obviously in the Wars of the Roses, head of the House of York, if you like. And he died at the Battle of Wakefield, and his head was displayed on Micklegate. So I wanted to go and have a look at that. So you can walk around, not his head, the gate. You can walk around the Roman walls, or the city walls, and see that gate that's still there. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I will go into that more shortly. But like I say, I'm streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and soon I'm actually over on Rumble as well now. Rumble as British History with Philippa, I think it is. I've just set it up and I couldn't get just British History, but I'm hoping actually you can look for me under that. Or you can look for my name, Philippa, Philippa. So if you're on Rumble, please do come and give me a follow there, because I think if I get 5 followers, I can start doing live streams on there as well. So yeah, so it would be very cool. So Rumble, why, Manda? Because it's a better search function and all sorts. So and it doesn't tend to thwart you for using particular words. And actually in the history field at the moment, very difficult to talk about some subjects, because you'll use certain words in their context, and you'll be either sort of the video's subdued or demonetized, and they're very in context, so it's a shame. But you can support me anyway by giving this video a thumbs up, a like, and everything. That would be great. Obviously, if you want to buy me super chats, stars, hearts, that's also always welcome. But what I would love you to do is come over to my Patreon, patreon.com/Philippa. No, it's not. It's /British history. Oh my goodness, I can't speak. British history. And that is where for £5 a month I give you loads back. In there at the moment is an extended interview with Illyri Lynn, an exclusive blog on killing a king, which, so yesterday, 30th of January, was the anniversary of the execution of Charles I. And in my blog, I argue, and I think you can read the first part of it on my Substack as well, until it goes behind the paywall. But I argue in the introduction, it's so familiar to us that Charles I was beheaded, and that is almost absorbed. I think it is generally absorbed into the story of the English civil wars, the rise of Oliver Cromwell, the Republican, you can call it, experiment, because we know that after 11 years it finished, etc., etc. And so the fact that the English Parliament killed the English king for treason is very interesting, and it's a topic that I like to get into, because treason is a crime against the king. It's it's to keep um, the person of the king, who at the time the Treason Act of 1352 was written, it could never be envisaged that the king would be separate from the state, really, not whilst in position anyway. Um, so how do you actually try, convict, and execute a king for treason? So I've gone into that in the blog. But anyway, if you're a patron, you've got access to that full blog. And I'd like to give a shout out to Kerry and Stephanie, who've become patrons in the last couple of weeks. Welcome to you very much. Oh, and I'm also requesting questions at the moment for the next interviewee that I have. She is Kate. She is the curator at Churchill War Rooms. So I am heading off down to London next week to go to the Churchill War Rooms again and do an interview with the curator there, which I'm really looking forward to. Right, shall I get back to Lincoln and York? And I have got another bit to tell you about one of the events that we've got coming up, which is online, so you can all come to it if you like. It's our next online history festival for spring, and it's going to be on the Stuarts. Just talked about Charles there. In fact, let me tell you now, because we've got 6 talks. Gareth Russell, who has done all of our online history festivals, he's my tour historian when we go away. He's just fabulous. I've just mentioned his book, actually, Young and Damned and Fair. If you're going to Lincoln and York, take that book with you, and you can follow that progress that Catherine Howard and Henry VIII did and what happened at both those places. But anyway, Gareth is doing a talk about, well, it's called The Life of a Stuart Queen, Anna of Denmark. And if any of you have read The Palace, Gareth's latest book, then you will have heard you have read the chapter about Anna. Anyway, he goes into her life in more detail. Katie Wignall, who, if you don't follow her already, have a look on Instagram, look up London. She is an incredible Blue Badge guide, but she's got a brilliant channel. You'll love her voice, I guarantee it. Go and check it out just for her voice. She is doing the Great Fire of 1666, the Great Fire of London. We have Professor Alice Hunt, who is talking about Oliver Cromwell and the English Republic. Julian Humphreys, who some of you will already know from interviews I've done, and also if you watch History After Dark, he was a guest recently. He is going through the fascinating and harrowing, actually, escape of Charles II after the Battle of Worcester. So the hunted king, the escape of Charles II. He very, very, very nearly didn't make it. Again, I was just saying about we sort of looking at it backwards, and everything sort of go, yes, we had the English Civil Wars, and then we had the Republic, and then we invited Charles back. Charles is only there to get back, to bring back from the continent, because he managed to escape. And that's an amazing story. Andrea Zuvich is talking to us about the mistresses of the Stuart court. She's got a great book on that as well. And then myself, I am doing a talk on the Gunpowder Plot. It's another story that sounds like we know it all. It's all very familiar, but there are bits that have kind of been just sort of glossed over in the story, and I want to go into that in more detail. So that is the Stuarts Online History Festival lineup. The festival takes place from the 22nd till the 24th of March with a live Q&A panel on the 24th of March. And if you're very quick, you'll nab the last couple of early bird tickets that are £18, and then it will go to the full price tickets, which they're still only £21.50. So it's definitely not an expensive event. It's priced to make it accessible to everybody. So if you want more details of that as well, and if you want to get your tickets, you can see it scrolling on the bottom there. But if you're listening on the podcast, if you go to the stuarts2024.eventbrite.co.uk, and you can get your tickets there. Can everyone still hear me okay? because I don't know if my comments have stopped. But anyway, maybe that is because yeah, okay. All right. So last week I did a day in Lincoln, and then I went up to York for about 3 days. Um, and like I say, many of you have been on tour with me or are coming on tour with me. And so you'll be probably I hope, quite excited to know that I am heavy into 2025's tours. Oh, actually, I will make mention. If you were thinking of coming on the Anne Boleyn tour in May, unfortunately, someone's had to cancel due to ill health. So I have got one room left. So if you want to check that out, go to britishhistorytours.com, and the itinerary and all the information is on there. And you can go to book a tour and download the booking forms and send those in. But yeah, also, I'm going to be opening up the bookings for the 2025 Anne Boleyn tour. So it'll be the same date, 16th till the 20th of May, but 2025. And bookings for that will be opening for priority bookers. So that's anyone who's a member of my Patreon in a couple of weeks' time. And then a week after that will be open for general bookings. Right. So there you go. So yes. So Lincoln and York. So you could do these both in together. It is about an hour. I think it took me an hour and a half to drive between the two. But you are following in the footsteps of Henry VIII and Catherine Howard on their progress of 1540. They are by no means the only people whom you are following, but that's quite an interesting story because of how it links into the downfall of Catherine Howard. And when you go, let's start with Lincoln. Lincoln, I had been told that the cathedral would blow me away, that it would it's stunning, and it really is. It really is. What I would say about Lincoln as well as a place to go is you can do pretty much everything you need to do on foot. The cathedral is directly opposite the castle. I'll come back to the castle in a minute. But the cathedral, yeah, absolutely beautiful. Henry and Catherine visited here. It's also where, let me get this right, it's where Catherine Swynford is buried. Her tomb is there. Catherine Swynford, of course, was the third wife of John of Gaunt. But they'd been having a relationship, and they'd had all of their children that they were going to have, I think, while he was still married to Blanche of Lancaster. And after Blanche's death, he married Catherine Swynford, and their children were legitimised, and they took on the name Beaufort. So Margaret Beaufort, mother of Henry VII, is a descendant of Catherine Swynford, and therefore so is Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, etc., etc. And her tomb is at Lincoln Cathedral. Like I say, I'm going to rattle through this because if you're going, then these are the places that I would say to go. And York, packed, absolutely full of things to do. So the castle opposite. It's very medieval. The town of Lincoln is very medieval. Oh, thank you, Linda. Yes, I'll post the Rumble link below when I finish this. Thank you very much. So it's a very medieval town. So again, I will share some more pictures on Instagram. I'll do Instagram and Facebook for some pictures of it, and also on Patreon. I'll send you post some more. So you get a feel of being in an old English town. There's lots of little shops and a very, very steep, very, very steep road, as far as I remember, where I went to find some food. You have the Bishop's Palace as well. So I'll mention that first, actually. So the Bishop's Palace was where Catherine and Henry would have stayed probably during their progress, um, and so that's it's in ruin, but that is still that's run by English Heritage, and you can go and visit there. The castle has a great wall walk from which you can take brilliant pictures back towards the cathedral. But inside the castle walls is no longer a castle, but a prison, a Victorian prison with a women's wing and a men's wing. And as you go round the castle, in the middle of, I suppose it is kind of in the middle of the prison, there is a dedicated building to Magna Carta, because Lincoln Castle, not cathedral, is one of well, there's 4 surviving 1215, so original Magna Cartas, and it Lincoln has one. There's one at Salisbury Cathedral and there's 2 in the British Library. But the Lincoln one, the Lincoln one is there. It's on rotation with a Charter of the Forest, which sounds boring, but to the everyday people like us, if we were living in 1215 or 1217 when it was, I think, first issued, that was so important. The Norman kings, and they're so from William and down through John, had taken a lot of land. I think it was about a third of England as basically royal forest, royal hunting ground. And if you were caught poaching, and by poaching, finding food, people who couldn't afford or can't eat, anyway, so the punishments were severe. I think you could even be executed for poaching. People couldn't graze their own animals on that sort of land, so it become a real contentious issue. And so the Charter of the Forests was issued in from 1217 onwards by Henry III. He was only a child in 1217 when his father, King John, had died, and he'd become king. And under his in his minority, the Magna Carta was reissued alongside the Charter of the Forests, and actually that's when it became or that it had to be differentiated from the Charter of the Forest. So Magna Carta means the bigger charter. When that was first issued in 1215, it wasn't known as Magna Carta. But once there were 2 charters, it was the bigger of the 2. And the Charter of the Forest is displayed at Lincoln as well. So it's that's amazing. You're inside this prison. Now, the prison itself is very well preserved and has definitely got a feel to it. I was in there on my own, so that didn't help. And in the women's side, there was more. Now, actually, the conditions I don't think were bad from what is there. I'll talk about York Prison later. That was much worse. The idea was that people could get, or people convicted of things could get religious tuition. They would, work hard, but they could resolve what they could sort of save their souls and become useful citizens, leave with kind of a trade, or and certainly a good education, especially in religious terms. And this was very spooky, a surviving chapel, the only surviving chapel I have to be careful not to mix up the two here because there's a prison in New York as well. But in Lincoln, there's this surviving chapel, and I think I did post a picture of this. Apparently, it is the only one in the world from this period, and there's a replica somewhere in Australia. You walk in and you walk to the top of this chapel, and um, it's on a gradient. So every row is on a different level. So it goes down and down and down and down and down. And that's so that the preacher can see everybody, or everyone can see the preacher. But this is in a prison. So you don't want all the prisoners all together in one massive group. So what they did was each prisoner had his own individual sort of booth. And the first one to go in would walk right to the end, and that door would be shut. Then the next one, that door would be shut. The next one, that door would be shut. Next one, that door would be shut. And when I walked in to the top, to the back of this chapel, which is kind of in a semicircle shape as well, I just scanned the room and saw the top of someone's head. I was in there on my own, and and then realized, I thought it's got to be a mannequin. It's got to be a mannequin. Not quite sure what I want it to be, but okay, it's a mannequin. Just calm down. It's fine. And then looked over, and there were more mannequins. And then I went down to the front, walked back up this other side into the pulpit, and looked out, and there's loads of mannequins sat there. Listening to the ready to listen to the preacher. It was a surreal experience, but very, very interesting. It was very worthwhile. So, Lincoln, I would say you could do in a good day or two, but it's lovely. It's a lovely, lovely place. I mean, I was there in January as well, so I'm sure it's even more beautiful in the warmer times, in spring or summer. But then I made my way up to York. Now, York, there aren't many cities. There aren't many places in England actually where you're not going to get, if you look hard enough, all periods of history. Gloucester is a great example of somewhere where you can go and see right back to Roman history. London, of course, but York has the added benefit of Viking history there as well. So anyway, so we'll get into this, but yeah, so York, I spent. Oh, how does it do that? Did you see that? Did I just do a thumbs up and it comes up with a bubble? Did anybody else see that? Did it to me and Catherine the other day. I don't know what it's doing. Anyway, so like I say, it took about an hour and a half to drive from Lincoln to York. You can probably get the train. I didn't look because I was in the car. Famous for the shambles, famous for York Minster, famous for the city walls. Like I've already mentioned before, Micklegate, where Richard, Duke of York's head was displayed with his paper crown after the Battle of Wakefield. I made my way, first of all, to the Minster. And so York Minster is situated on a site where there was a Roman temple. And actually outside of the Minster, one of the columns that they found when they were doing some repinning work or something is now stood up outside of the Minster. So that's quite cool. So you can go right back to Roman history there. It's followed by an Anglo-Saxon Minster and then a Gothic one as well. I mean, York itself goes from Roman, Anglo-Saxon, Viking, mixing the two, and then of course the impact of the Norman conquest with the uprising in the north and this establishing of these two castles at York by William the Conqueror. Of course, William took on the North uprising with the harrying of the North, this horrible laying waste to vast areas. Um, Melissa, try a V for victory with both hands. Well, I had half my finger chopped off, didn't I? So I don't know if I can do V for victory with both hands. I can only do it with one. It looks a bit pathetic on the other hand. Doesn't really work anymore. Yeah. Thinking of getting a prosthetic because I'm not sure whether I can cope with having a weird finger. But anyway, there you go. I'll come back to the shambles in a minute because there's a story linked to the shambles. But if I just remain on the castles for a bit, I mentioned earlier the motte of the other castle, which I can't remember what it was called now, but there literally is just this hillock. And it's right next to one of the entryways into the city walls, which you can then walk around, which was, do you know, it was quite, I don't know what the word would be. But the walls, they're wide, but no barriers on one side. It was quite refreshing to not have something, sort of overly engineered because people don't know to walk off the edge of something. I don't know. It was great to walk around just as it would have been. But on the other, like I say, on the other side of the Ouse, you have the other castle. Now, you may have heard of Clifford's Tower. That's the remaining part of York Castle. Clifford's Tower. Melissa says StreamYard plus Apple does those fire. Oh, there's fireworks as well, but we don't know how. I have to just do hand signals and see if I can work it out. It just look odd. Just look really weird in the meantime. Clifford's Tower, I have to say I was a little bit disappointed in. I still would go, definitely go. It was blinking cold and windy when I was there though, so I certainly couldn't enjoy the rooftop views, which you would be able to if you were going on a nicer day. But you could get a very good idea of the lay of the land around you. And yeah, I was so anyway, let's just go through this. So Clifford's Tower was sort of created as a as a royal keep, so at the royal palace or royal castle, but no king ever actually stayed there. So it was made ready. The most fascinating part for me was coming across the chapel inside the tower. That was fascinating. And again, I'll share photos. Right, just to give you an idea, one day in Lincoln, I took 550 photos. So in York, over 3 days, I haven't actually looked, but I think it must be something horrendously large. I just everyone pray that my phone never gives up the ghost. So coming across this chapel, this Norman chapel inside Clifford's Tower was amazing. Now they tell the really horrible, harrowing story of the persecution of the Jewish community in York in 13. Oh my goodness, sorry, I can't remember the year. And it was a worse story than I'd even remembered it as. Really scapegoating, persecuting the Jewish community to the point where they took, under the king's I'm just looking for the book, under the king's protection, they were taken into Clifford's Tower, and they decided that they thought that their cause was lost, really, and some of them committed suicide, and actually of the ones who survived and were persuaded to leave, they they were beaten and such like afterwards. So it's horrible, harrowing story. Next to Clifford's Tower, just to bring it up a little bit, is the Castle Museum. And this is where I said there's another prison, like in Lincoln. Another it was a prison, so you get another idea of what life was like. Now, this one is a much more harrowing prison. They do it brilliantly, though. They tell stories of people who actually were kept there, including the last female prisoner to be executed by burning was York. She was kept there. And yeah, so they tell the stories sort of in the cells. The cells are quite dark. Again, it's got a real feel to it, as you would probably expect. They also, inside the museum, then on the other side, do a full on Victorian street recreation. It's really quite fantastic. With I'm saying Victorian. It might be, yes, Victorian. With the shops as they would have been. There is a bar in there which has been lifted and shifted from somewhere else, saved and put in there. So it's really worth having a look in that museum. I went from Clifford's Tower and the Castle Museum to the Jorvik Museum. This museum is the Viking Museum of York. And so Jorvik is the Viking name for York. And you first go in, you walk down. I was a Billy no mates. Everyone else is there either with their family or a school group or something. And I was going around on my own. You have to get over that when you do my job. When you first walk in, I got talking to a brilliant guy in there. You walk in and you walk onto a glass floor where you're sort of underneath this glass floor. You can see they've done an excavation and they've put the floor on top, obviously. And it's a little bit difficult, I thought, to work out what was what. But he took me through it, and it was basically they didn't have foundation, so it's the remnants of the walls of little huts that that people would live in. You could see where there had been a hearth in one. You could see where they had they sort of built in a kind of sofa bed type arrangement into the house. There was also a drain, which the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxon period, when the Vikings raided the north and settled in the north of England, is obviously after the Roman occupation, which brought with it sanitation, sewage systems, underfloor heating, all sorts of arrangements that do seem to have been lost. So it's almost quite surprising when you see, oh yeah, of course, someone else worked out that you needed a channel for water to escape from. But anyway, that was there. And then you go onto a ride, effectively. So again, this is where I was on my own on this like 6-person cart, and you go through a series of streets of Jorvik, and there are people, obviously waxworks, whatever, animatronics. Is that what they call animatronics? Where so you get to see how people lived. You learn about the trades they were in, what sort of things they made. So, for instance, dyed cloth was one. You saw how they made their houses. So in one case, they're sort of digging out a cellar sort of arrangement. The Jorvik Museum used to be famous for its smell-o-vision. Not smell-o-vision because you're there, but it smells. So they pump in the smells. Now that used to be of excrement, basically. But they had a bit of a refurb. I think they got I think they got flooded actually in 2015, something like that. And after that, they upgraded their smell-o-vision. So, but you go past a boat with uh, so the Vikings were slave traders as well, and so you go past a boat with evidence of that. But then there's baskets of fish, as you get a fish smell hit you as well. Um, you go down a street, like a market with market stalls all the way down. So it was fascinating, really, really enjoyable. So I would recommend you go to that if you are into Viking history, or just even if you want to see how, human beings lived and progressed, or went backwards in terms of technology. Um, so near to um, that's right. So near to the I've talked about the Minster, but near to the Minster is somewhere called the Shambles, which if you know anything about York, you've probably heard of the Shambles. And it's just, I think it's famous because it's really well preserved medieval street. It's small. So it's very picturesque as well. Um, if if you're not there on a day where they have multiple vans in the middle of the street. And when I say middle, like as in it's a slim street and they're in the middle of it, so it closes it. So I don't know. I think they were doing something on the roofs, so that wasn't quite so good for photographs. But I pretended that I didn't see the barriers. Well, actually, I thought the barriers were for vehicles. It turns out they were also for pedestrians. But I was trying to find, bear in mind, I'm 3.5 hours away from home as well. So I'm like, I'm going to go and have a look. I'm going to go and have a look. Lottie Rose says, don't go on weekends to the Shambles if you can help it. It's full of, yeah, Harry Potter fans, full of Harry Potter shops. Amazing. And so, but I was looking specifically, and I am going to go back and do this again. I was looking for Margaret Clitheroe's house. So, if you've ever uh, seen, is it called Gunpowder? There's a film, and it begins with horrible, 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 harrowing scene of a lady. Now, close your ears if you're of a sensitive nature. Like I say, this is why Rumble might be an idea, because I have to be a little bit careful on YouTube. So she Margaret Clitheroe is killed because she harbors a priest, and her house is on the Shambles. So that was why I wanted to go and have a look. Now, she is actually killed on the, oh goodness, there was a toll booth on the Ouse Bridge. Yeah, that's right. I don't know why it's called the Ouse, but the river's called the Ouse. Maybe it's the first bridge there. I'm not sure why it would get the name of the river when there's multiple bridges. But anyway, she was killed at the toll booth on, like I say, on the Ouse Bridge, going from one side of the Ouse onto the other. And she was killed by being crushed, purportedly by her own front door, and then heavy rocks placed on top of her. So she was effectively, she was martyred. Catholic unrest was already, so with the death of, this happens early on in James the First's reign, I think. Can't remember the exact year. I don't think it was still in Elizabeth's reign. I might be wrong. Either way, it's at the beginning of the 17th century in York. And so she's harboring a priest so that she can hear mass, so that her friends can hear mass, and she's caught and she's executed for it. This adds to the Catholic sort of feeling that they really haven't got much of a chance now. This is why I'm thinking it is in the very beginning of James's reign. But anyway, because with the accession of James I, well, James VI of Scotland as James I of England, the English Catholics are hoping that that the persecution of Catholics is going to die down, that they're going to be able to um, um, what you call it, worship in their own way again. However, there are some hardliners who they want more. They want to go back. And the murder of Margaret Clitheroe may well have been one of these events in a long series of events, but that actually starts to turn the needle. There is a man living in York who'd been born in York called Guy Fawkes. He was born in York. He was christened in York. He was christened at a church right next to the Minster. I think it's called St Bartholomew's. I can't remember now. And he's he's from York as well. So you can go to a Guy Fawkes pub, which is right next to the church, if you want to. And I'll be talking a lot more about Guy Fawkes, obviously, in my talk for the Stuarts Online History Festival on the Gunpowder Plot. It's very interesting whether he was how much of a gunpowder expert he was. But anyway, well, I'll go into that in my talk. So yeah, so I made it up the shambles, even though I wasn't supposed to, so that I could go and find Margaret Clitheroe's house. And actually, there's a shrine to her inside, but it was closed, so I couldn't go in. And then I went further on to St Mary's Abbey. This was one of the stops again for Henry VIII and Catherine Howard when they were on progress in 1540. It's now a ruin, of course, because all the monasteries mainly are. It was it's very pretty though, and you can get an idea of the size of it. Unfortunately, there was some girls doing a TikTok video in the middle of the abbey when I was there, so I had to wait out in the cold just to try and get a good photo and get some video and photos without them like doing some sort of dance in the middle of it. But bless them, they were having fun. But next to it, there's a few things actually. There's a Roman wall near it. There is the King's House, which is part of the University of York, and that was where Henry VIII actually stayed and Catherine stayed. You can't go in there, but you can see it. There's Roman walls. There's a Roman, they call it I think they call it the multi-angular tower, or no, that can't be something like that anyway. The multi-angular tower, Roman tower. St Leonard's Hospital, which I mentioned earlier, this 200-bed hospital, the largest in the country when it was closed. But in amongst all of that is York City Museum. And oh my goodness, it is packed of amazing things. Now, there's going to be a lot of items from that collection that I will be sharing in Patreon. And I will share some on Instagram as well and Facebook as well. But there is some amazing pieces in there. Not least a Viking helmet. Well, it looks Anglo-Saxon. It looks very much like the Sutton Hoo helmet, that amazing helmet that was buried in that ship burial, the Sutton Hoo, which was discovered in 1939, wasn't it, or 1938, just before the outbreak of the. Oh, actually, was it the outbreak of the First or Second World War that it was found? Anyway, and it's all in the British Museum now. There's a helmet that looks just like that, but without all the bling on it. There is a lot of things from the Abbey, evidence of how, I mean, goodness me, it was amazing. It must have been absolutely stunning, this Abbey. So, but yeah, like I say, I will share. There's the oh gosh, what's it called? There's a jewel that is attributed to Richard III's wife, Anne Neville. Um, there's all sorts in there, so I will be sharing that, sharing a lot of those. So I will let you go now because I will be back later at 8:15 with the girls on History After Dark to talk about Charles Darwin. We're on our History Heroes series, so people who are considered heroes from history, we're giving them the same treatment really as the people who were considered gits. So last year was the year of the git, history gits. This is History Heroes. And so, like I said, tonight is Charles Darwin. So we'll be back at 8:15 on History After Dark for that. Before you go, just a reminder, the interview with Illyri Lynn on dressing the Tudor court, that is available now on YouTube. And if you want the extended ad-free version, that is on Patreon. The blog on how on earth you get to charge and execute a king for treason, which is a charge laid which is a law, a crime which has up till now solely been against the king. So, not solely, but anyway, I go into that in the blog. That's available on Patreon. You can also go to my Substack for the blogs and become a paid subscriber there, and you can get the blogs there about once a month. And if you're interested in coming on tour with me, the Anne Boleyn tour in May, 16th till 20th of May, has one room left. So I would love to see you there if that's of interest. And if you would like to maybe wait a year and come in May 2025, then that will be on sale very soon. And if you join Patreon, you get 7 days exclusivity in terms of booking before it goes on general sale. So, right. I will see you all, hopefully, later. If I don't see you later, I will see you next week. All right. Take care, everybody.